Thank you all so much. There's a lot to unpack here. I just in rewatching this, something stuck out to me that I thought might be an interesting place to start. Diane, in your piece, there's a line, "Is it true that in a photograph, there's the only way to look inside," or something like that.
Is it true that only a photograph can see inside?
Can see inside. And I was thinking about the shared themes of performance of self and self-actualization and kind of the relationships between representation and subjectivity, which I think all of the works share. But yeah, maybe we could start with you, Diane, and thinking about how in your work, like the pop language and pop music, and in particular, the way you use choreography and song to kind of express the kind of historical traumas that are kind of embedded within this like one character.
Yeah, I think that actually I just saw Sarah's film for the first time, and I kind of felt like my character, or some space that I was channeling, was like a subject. You know, like that Veronica is like a subject of the space that you're referencing. But I think I was looking at very kind of like specific regimes of image making, and specifically maybe what I was kind of looking at this sort of top-down image making regime in South Korea with K-pop, and then also just in my other works, I think a lot about the documentary image and kind of where that comes from. And I was just interested in this space of, like, as you said, like self-actualization through the image and the different forms that takes. And I was really into K-pop because the choreography itself is extremely like imagistic and very schematic. And kind of if you're into that culture at all, which I got deeply into during COVID because it's so photographic, everything can kind of be broken down into like a singular image. Even the music itself and how it's made, it's kind of like extremely like referential, and they're almost like snapshots. It's a sort of genre mashing that I found interesting. I mean, there's so much more I could say.
Well, maybe we could jump to Fox, because I was thinking with your piece that there's also this use of pop music and kind of like a pop vernacular of images as a way to kind of, to me, it feels like an expression of your subjective experience of place. And I think it's, you know, there's kind of like cryptic things happening where the viewer's not quite let into some of the meaning, but I think it's a kind of expressed through the affect that's kind of built into the pop language. Do you want to speak about that?
About the music?
Yeah, and just generally like the way you kind of convey your kind of very personal experience of place kind of through the language of, yeah, pop music, and also like the borrowed kind of like digital stickers and things like that.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a hard thing for the film. It's about my tribe's land dispute with another tribe. And so it's like a very hard thing to talk about because, you know, I think today it's a lot easier to be like, oh, you know, the bad guy is a very clear image of a bad guy, you know? And in this case, it's like the two sides are family. So there isn't really a bad guy. It's just two different beliefs. And so the music and the imagery and the meaning behind everything is just a combination of family and history and things that speak to the place that I come from, and, you know, me going through it right now.
Do you want to say more about the music choices?
No.
Sarah, maybe we'll jump to you. In your the title of your piece, Glass Life, is borrowed from what was her name?
Shoshana Zuboff.
Zuboff, yeah, her text. I wonder if you could tell us a bit about the thinking that went into the piece in relation to her ideas.
Yeah, I mean, I start usually all my videos by reading for like a year, and that is a 800-page book, The Age of Surveillance Capitalism by Shoshana Zuboff. And initially the piece was going to be kind of just focused on that one text, which is about how we've kind of lost our ability to separate ourselves from the world of media and images, and how we need space outside of these things to kind of form ourselves and to reassess what's important to us so that we can enter the world as ethical beings who have a sense of what matters, instead of just kind of being pulled apart by all these forces and ideas all the time. And the film kind of keeps going back to that text in its form. Like, it's supposed to be about this kind of overwhelming abundance of images and also language that kind of becomes almost like kitsch or image, like this kind of theoretical description of stuff that's supposed to explain something but doesn't ultimately really get you anywhere. But then I realized I needed to use like 50 other texts, and that it wouldn't be enough to kind of just rely on this one. But it really begins with that idea that we kind of can't find this space to exit the world and see what's actually happening, and instead we're just like in the middle of everything all the time. And especially during COVID, which this is very much a COVID film, like made obsessively by myself, that just seemed so true. Like, we were all living so much through screens, even more than we usually are. Yeah.
It'd be great to hear you all speak a bit about your process in working. Maybe Sara, since we're already speaking, you could talk a bit about that, like what it's like to be in your studio and kind of the research process of, you know, blending the text with the image research, and then how you end up performing it kind of physically in the space of your studio.
Yeah, I mean, in this case, I had a very kind of organized beginnings. Like, it was categorized into themes like beauty, truth, surveillance, shopping, and illness, which seemed like important themes at the time. And I organized 500 pages of my own writing and collected writing under those themes. And then I started shooting that kind of overhead scene, which is built in my studio. It's shot through panes of glass with a camera going above it. And each kind of pane is organized around the theme. And I kind of planned which image you would see that would then zoom into the other videos. So it's a very obsessive and long process. And in its gallery iteration, it's actually a 6-channel video. So when you zoom into one of those scenes, it then plays out on other screens. So you do get more of a sense of what's actually happening in the other kind of images, and they sort of play out. And you also have this sense that you don't really know what to look at, and you can't decide where to put your attention.
Yeah, Diane.
Should I talk about my process?
Yes,
Okay.
please.
It's hard to describe my process with video, but it definitely begins with reading, and it begins with kind of analyzing my desires at a given point in time. But I think what's important to note is I think that, there are things that are real about my video, which is that there's like a Vietnamese diaspora in Poland that was kind of sponsored by the USSR and then later met by like Southern Vietnamese people. And then there's also K-pop is also disproportionately popular in Eastern Europe and I think South America and kind of maybe areas of the world that might have communist histories, which I think is kind of interesting. And so there were all these teenagers in Warsaw who have all these K-pop crews and practice with their friends and post videos. And I think all these things are real, but then I guess the process is about how to condense them and transform them into like their own space, because it is all simultaneously happening. But yeah, I think my process is just about like finding the desire in the historical narratives and also just condensing that towards like a more psychological journey, I guess.
I film every day, pretty much. So I've been doing that for a long time. Maybe 10 years. Maybe that's a long time. And I have an archive to work through. I hate editing so much. I love filming, so that's, I think the process is like there has to be good and bad with whatever we do. You just gotta do it. So for me, that's the editing. Man, I don't want to sit down. I don't want to be still. I'd rather be outside. But this film was different because I didn't pull so much from my archive. Kind of just made it at home, around home. And it was fueled entirely by anger and pain. And maybe every film is fueled by anger and pain. And it's like a way to push that into something that feels like it's gone, or feels like it's honoring something, or feels like it's just like being emotionally honest without telling you all exactly what's going on. It's like a way of communicating.
Yeah, like a kind of catharsis of, maybe we'll open up to some questions, because I'm sure there are some in the audience. Don't be shy. There's one here, and there's a mic coming for you.
It's a lot, but it was really amazing working with those kids. And I'll kind of give a shortened version, but I basically, after months of kind of online casting, basically being on Instagram and writing down a huge master list of every profile in Warsaw where there's like a teen K-pop dancer, I held real life auditions in Warsaw, and I kind of was able to find like my favorites from all the groups, and maybe like 60 people showed up, and I picked 6 kids. The main girl, the Vietnamese one, she's actually the only one that wasn't into K-pop, and I was like, I was looking for a Vietnamese girl in Warsaw, and it was just kind of impossible because even though they're a minority, they're minorities, so they're not going to be represented through like basic commercial channels like a modeling agency or acting or something. So just out of total desperation, I was in bed and I typed into Instagram the name Veronica with a W, which I knew is a common Polish first name, and then I just added my last name, which is Vietnamese, and she was the first profile to come up. And it was incredible. I mean, I just DM'd her. We Zoomed a few days later. I prayed before the Zoom because I knew I was coming to Warsaw, and I just wanted her to look like her photos, and it wouldn't be like a fake thing, because she has this exact look that somehow fit for me. And then the choreography I worked on with actually a Vietnamese, like, American person who lives and works in Seoul, Korea, who choreographs. He's also an artist, Alvin Tran, who choreographs for the commercial K-pop industry, but more like second and third tier, not like the top K-pop people. And then with the music, with all my videos, I guess I make the music before I begin filming. So I wrote the lyrics to that song, and then I worked on it with my friend Ryder Bach, who is kind of like a producer type. And I guess we co-wrote it together. And Alvin and I also worked on the choreography because there's something kind of, there's like a language to movement relationship in K-pop that happens a lot, and I found it kind of interesting to interpret that.
There's a question there.
I don't know how to say it either, but I guess it's just a fun way to edit, like making it layered with images that maybe I grew up with, or something that adds a little spice to the moment. Is that?
That's fine.
I mean, in yours, I felt like it added some needed levity, or it made it kind of feel like how irony can be the best form of protest or something. Like it added a bit of irony or something that I felt like helped me understand your tone in your film, the layering. I don't know if that's how you were using it.
Yeah, I mean, I think being funny is definitely the best answer to anything that's fucking with you.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, so that
the
it's very
sparkles
true.
are funny.
Yeah, the sparkles. Yeah,
And the no more drama, of
Yeah,
course.
I like the no more drama.
just happened to be the paint swatch.
It's perfect. Was there another question over here?
I know mine is done when no part of it drives me crazy anymore. And I really try to make it 12 minutes max, although this one's 19. Mine is not supposed to really be watched like this. Like, it's not really a beginning to end. It's meant to be this kind of like wash of information. But yeah.
I guess I just usually have to finish editing by a deadline, and that's how it works. But also the text helps, you know, when I have the text rearranged out, and that creates some kind of narrative. And I think I also like to play with the idea of narrative and even create kind of like a false, it's not false, but sort of a 3-act structure. And I'm interested in those structures that kind of have like a emotional resonance to them and kind of play within those.
I usually think of it like practice for the next thing that I want to say. So, yeah, I take a long time to think about what I want to say, and I think maybe that has to do with the editing too. So by the time I think the thought is wrapped up in the film, I'm already thinking, okay, this is practice for the next thing that I want to say.
I realized, Sarah, we didn't touch on your thoughts on the layering of images. I think that was the question.
Yeah, I mean, I guess one of the nice things about working in film is like the kind of logic of one image coming after the other in a time-based situation, and when there's kind of one image beginning while the other one's still there, you can really stretch what makes sense to a viewer. So that's a big reason I was sort of using like where one image starts inside the other. And then in moments like where the emoji pig is talking, it's like the same thing I was saying about Pox's film, like the idea that the pig is saying this Shakespeare text about feminism and female sadness, and it's too annoying in some ways to just say that, or, you know, I understand the context in which I might be saying that text and how an audience might receive it. So maybe I think a pig can say it and have it be received more closely to how I would like it to be. Which is to say that like irony or making things a joke kind of means you're in on the joke and thus might be taken more seriously.
Thank you all so much. I think that's all the questions we have, but really appreciate you all sharing your process with us and the films as well. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.